Hello students, Standard 8, the revision in physics, chapter number 12, friction. We know that friction or the force of a friction occurs due to the ups and downs or irregularities in the surface. When the two surfaces coming in contact with each other, these irregularities lock each other, and therefore the motion is opposed because the force of friction is produced, and it slows down the moving object. So, because of that, we saw that when a ball is rolling on the ground, gradually slows down and finally stops. Similarly, while applying the brakes to the vehicles, they also slow down, and if you apply suddenly, they can stop also. Also, we saw that when we step on a banana skin, we slip. Here the force of friction depends on the type of the surface. Smooth surface has less friction, while the rough surfaces can have more frictions. So, the material of the surface is the main thing that will cause the friction, more or less. Now, friction, as we saw that it is because of the irregularities in the two surfaces. Now, if we want to move the object from its position in which it is at rest, so it is not easier to move the box from the rest. Here, the measure of friction is the force required to overcome friction at the instant when object starts moving from the rest. So, to move the object from rest, the measure of force that we should apply so that it can overcome that friction, that is known as static friction. When the object is in rest position, the overlock of the irregularities is fixed, and therefore to move that object we have to apply more force. But maybe you have observed that when you once started moving the object from its rest, then it is little easier to move it ahead. Means once it is in motion, then you don't have to apply same force that you applied in the beginning when it was in rest. So the measure of force required when it is already in motion, that is measure of sliding friction. And obviously, when the object is already in motion, then the irregularities will not get enough time to get interlocked with each other again, and therefore it keeps moving. Therefore, the sliding friction is less than the static friction. So among these two frictions, sliding friction is smaller. So you understand about it, that what is sliding friction and static friction. Static friction is the measure of force required to bring the object from rest to motion, means to overcome that friction. And the static friction is more. But the sliding friction is that which the force is required to keep that object which is already in the motion. And therefore, as I told you, the sliding friction is smaller than the static friction. So that is the thing about the friction. Now we know that friction is known as a necessary evil. What is the meaning of necessary also and evil also? Because in some conditions, some situation, some actions are only possible if there is friction, or friction is more. Without friction, some of the things that we won't be able to do it. And on the other way, friction is sometimes making some disadvantages also. And therefore it is said that friction is a necessary evil. Now we know that sometimes we need to increase the friction. You know that why can we walk on the ground? It is possible only because of the force of friction. When we walk, there is a friction between our legs or the shoes that we wear and the soil or the earth. And therefore, we have a better grip on the earth when there is force of friction. Now you will understand that when you step on a banana skin, then what happens? The surface of the banana skin is very smooth. So we saw that the smooth surface will give you less friction. So when you step on the banana skin, there is less friction. Friction is decreasing, and therefore we won't have a better grip, and therefore we slip down. Similarly, when we walk on the floor on which the soap water is there or oil is dropped there, means if it is sticky, then the friction is less, and therefore we will not have a better grip. So we slide down. Similarly, some of our actions are due to the frictions only. You know, there are blackboards also, and on the blackboards we have to write with a chalk. Now, if you move your hand on the blackboard, you will find some irregularities. When we write with the chalk, then what happens? In the irregularities, the chalk powder is stuck on it, and therefore with that you can write down on it. But if the blackboard is very smooth, means very less friction, will you be able to write down with the chalk? Try to write down on a glass surface or a very smooth surface with the help of chalk. You won't be able to write down because there is very less friction between the glass surface and the chalk, and therefore the chalk powder cannot stuck when there is very smooth surface is there. So we cannot write with a chalk if there were no friction. Similarly, if there were no friction, we won't be able to walk on the floor also. You know, when you want to walk on the ice, can you walk properly? No, because it is very smooth material, and therefore it is not possible to walk with it. Similarly, when we want to fix a nail in the wooden plank, if there is no friction between the nail and the wooden material, then the nail won't be fixed in it. Because if there is less friction, the nail will come out again, because it's a smooth surface. So the nail also can be fixed only because of the force of friction is there. Sometimes when you know that there is a muddy in the rainy season, if the soil is muddy, it is difficult to drive a car from it. Your wheel will moving only, because there is less friction, and because of that it is not possible to do that. Similarly, the object when started moving, and if you don't apply the any other force, then it will keep moving. So if an object started moving, and if there were no brakes, no force of friction, how will we stop it? It won't be able to stop that vehicle. So there will be no friction between the tires and the road, and we won't be able to stop when we need to do it. Similarly, without friction, no building could be constructed. Buildings can be constructed because there is friction, and therefore it is possible to build. So these are the examples in which friction is necessary. You also can give other examples. You can write down in your notebook with the pen or pencil. Also because of the force of friction. You can rub out the things with the eraser. Also because of the friction. Now, on the other hand, it is evil also, because sometimes we don't need the friction, or it causes some damages. For example, the ball bearings or soles of the shoes are getting damaged. You know that when we use some shoes for a long time, then what happens? Every time there is a friction between the ground and our shoes, sole of the shoes. So it is always getting damaged, and after a long use, we won't be able to use that shoes because that sole is broken out. So the soles of our shoes get worn out after a period of time because of the force of friction between the earth and the sole of the shoes. Similarly, the ball bearings etc. are also getting broken. In the machinery also, the part which are always having friction can be broken, and we have to replace them. Similarly are there. Also, the other thing is that it is producing heat also. When we, sometimes in the winter time when it is cold weather, what do? We rub our palms with one another. When you rub your palms like that, then after that, if you feel it, then you will see that your palms are very means hotter than before. Because when we rub our hands, palms, then there is a force of friction which produces heat, and therefore we feel hot. Similarly, when you rub the matchsticks on the side of the matchbox, it produces heat, and therefore it is possible to make a fire. So, without friction, that is not possible. Similarly, there are so many other examples are also in which the heat is produced when the friction is there. For example, in the kitchen, you run the mixer grinder machine to grind something. After that you touch the jar, that jar will be hot. So here also between the blade and the material that you are grinding, they have friction and which produces heat. So jar becomes hot. Similarly, if you go to some factories where the machines are running on and on and on and on, you touch the machine, it will be hot. Even our bikes, motorbikes, etc. also, the engine gets hot because every time it is in the motion and there is friction between them which produces heat. So there are so many things. Now in some, we observe that in some cases we want to increase friction. Explain why. So in some situation we need to increase friction. Sometimes for the better performance, better grip. For example, if you see the sole of the shoes of the sportsman, they have spikes under the shoe. Why? So that while running they have better grip with the ground, and so they can run faster. So here they are trying to increase the friction. Similarly, if you see the tires of the vehicles, the tires of vehicles have grooves, some designs. Why they are grooves? So that it can have more friction such that the car or the vehicles can run easily on the floor, on the roads. And you know that after long use, if the tires grooves are disappeared, very smooth, it is dangerous to run that vehicle. Because if the grooves are gone, the tire becomes smooth and then it can slip out of the road and there is a chance of making accident. In this situation, we have to change that tires. Similarly, on the sole of your shoes also, your sports shoes especially, that also have that grooves. So in this situation, we increase the friction. And in some situation, we need to decrease friction so that some of the work can done easily, or we can prevent the damage due to the friction. For example, if you play the carom board, on the carom board we sprinkle powder, very fine powder, before we start playing. Because the surface of that blackboard, carom board is not so smooth, and therefore the coins cannot move easily to the hole at the corners. When you sprinkle the powder, it reduces the friction. It becomes smoother, and then it can easily be moving on the board, and it can go easily into the holes. So similarly, in the moving part of the machines or in the ball bearings, we need to oil them. Means we have to use the lubricants. Lubricants are the substances which are used to reduce the friction. So in the machines, some moving part, we have to put oil, or in the ball bearing you have to use the grease and some other materials like graphite, because it makes a layer which is smoother, and that will reduce the friction. So that are known as the lubricants. So lubricants will make the parts smoother, and so there is less friction. So we almost talked about all questions in the assignment. You have to write down on your own, and if any confusion, write down in the comment section. Thank you very much.